And welcome. We are back in 303 and we turn now back to Mr. Conrad's Unstoppable Volume Lesson 43 in the volume, page 151. Write down in your journals really quickly our focus here. The first one, of course, that is a bit humorous. Work is a four-letter word. I would write that one down. And of course, if you want it, you have to get it yourself, is another one of the focus here of our chapter. This one called Dig Your Pond. In the Unstoppable volume, Mr. Conrad several times will provide a word picture from his own biography, his own life. And this is one of the more compelling examples of his idea of what it takes to achieve greatness. Let's read together. When I was a little child, again I'm on page 151, lesson 43, Dig Your Pond. When I was a little child, my father took me to this field. Many times we were there and every time it was the same. I ran around and played in the field while my father stood there. It was as if he was imagining something that wasn't there. One day, huge Tonka trucks came to the field. They started to dig a hole much deeper and bigger than anything I could dig with my little Tonka trucks. I watched my dad go down into that hole. He started stacking what looked like big, heavy Lego blocks on top of each other. These are some of my earliest memories of watching my dad build our home. When I got to 7th grade, my dad sold that house and bought a farm. We were moving. I didn't want to. I liked the house that Dad built, and I didn't want to leave it until I was told the farm had a creek running through it. There was also fresh water spring. The spring, Dad told me, could be developed into a pond. When I heard that, I couldn't wait to move, to have a pond of my own. That was a dream come true. A couple of weeks after we moved to the farm, I went to talk to Dad. Okay, let's call the bulldozer guy and start digging the pond, I pleaded. Dad said, there's not going to be a bulldozer guy coming. Okay, let's call the backhoe guy, I begged. Nope, no backhoe either guy, he said. I was getting mad. I was told I could have a pond. How was I going to have a pond if somebody wasn't going to dig it? There's a pick, shovel, and a wheelbarrow in the shed, Dad said. Consider yourself lucky. A lot of kids don't even have that. That was vintage, Dad. If you want it, get it yourself. I'll read it again. It's such an important line in the Unstoppable Philosophy. If you want it, get it yourself. It's how he was brought up. He was trying to pass it on. I didn't see it that way. I was a teenager. I felt betrayed. I told Dad, thanks a lot. Thanks for nothing. Years later, that would be the title of a poem I wrote for him. I sent it to him for Father's Day. The title of the poem, Thanks for Nothing. Thanks when I was a baby in the cradle for not feeding me with a silver ladle. Thanks when I was a little boy for not buying me every new toy. Thanks when I was a little tyke for not buying me that brand new bike. And thanks when I became of age and wanted to go afar for not buying me that brand new car. And later, when I went off to college, for making me work to acquire the knowledge. And thanks when I finally got out for teaching me what it's all about. Oh, and thanks for not giving me the money when I bought the first house for me and my honey. Thanks for not giving me all those things I thought I wanted, for really, you gave me so much more. Craig Conrad. A beautiful sentiment. After I had got done feeling sorry for myself, I went to the shed and got the pick, shovel, and wheelbarrow with an attitude of, well, I'll show him. I started to dig. I quickly learned it doesn't take a rocket scientist to operate a shovel. It just takes a willingness to dig. I started digging when I was in 7th grade, and even as a 7th grader, I was smart enough to understand that if I dug one side of the pond and piled the dirt on the other side, I could get twice the pond for half the digging. Sometimes I'd hit a rock, and then the shovel wouldn't work, and that's when I'd use a pick, another piece of highly technological equipment. I kept on digging. In the 8th grade, the mosquitoes and black flies were so bad that I wanted to quit. However, I wanted a pond, so I kept digging. Some days my wheelbarrow would slip off my homemade bridge or tip over. All the dirt would fall back into the hole I just dug. I wanted to quit, but I wanted a pond more, so I kept digging. In 9th grade, I dug into some trees. I needed an axe to chop the roots. I'd hook the tractor up with a chain to pull out the stump. The wheels would spin. The stump wouldn't budge. I felt like quitting, but I wanted a pond, more digging. Finally, after 3 years of digging, one day I dug a shovel full and turned around. It was finished. I did it. Dad helped me put the dam breast in, and my pond was filling up with water. What a day at long last. My excitement was off the charts when water started to slowly trickle over the spillway. Faster, faster, now the water was gushing over. My dream had become my reality. I was on cloud 9. The next day we went to the Lobosh trout hatchery to stock my pond. Dad bought 100 trout. I could lay in my bed and look out my bedroom window and see my trout rising. I named some of them: Timmy Trout, Randy Rainbow, Betty Brook. It was so cool. I was in heaven for 6 months. Then hell came. Hell came in the form of Hurricane Agnes. Pennsylvania didn't get any wind, just 7 days of constant rain. Rivers rose 23 feet. The reading area was flooded, as was much of Berks County. The small, gently flowing creek that ran next to my pond had become a violent, raging torrent of water. It totally engulfed my pond, washed out my fish, and destroyed the dam breast. As if that wasn't bad enough, the runoff from the neighbor's cornfield filled my pond with muck. My pond and Randy Rainbow, Timmy Trout, Betty Brook were gone. I cried. 3 years of digging disappeared in 7 days. I cried harder. My dad walked over to me that day. He saw I was in tears, everything destroyed. He patted me on the shoulder and he said, "Sorry, Craig, but you can do it again." You don't want to hear that when you're a kid. I wanted to hear about the bulldozer coming, but nothing was ever said about the bulldozer coming that day. When I got through feeling sorry for myself the second time, I started digging again. This time I borrowed a page out of my grandfather's story, rough, tough, and hard to bluff. I vowed to build something that would never wash away. I dug the stones out of the fields like Grandpa did for his house. I dug the sand out of the creek. Dad purchased the cement. There was just one problem. I didn't know a thing about masonry, but I knew somebody who did, my grandfather. Together we built stone raceways that I could raise trout in. It was the last job he did before he passed away. Almost 10 years later, while my son Colton was still in diapers, we went back to Pennsylvania to visit my folks. Dad cleaned out the stone raceways and bought some trout. He landscaped and mowed the area around my pond. It looked great. With a rod in one hand and a bottle in the other, Colton caught his first fish in my pond that day. I filmed the whole thing, and that film's worth $1 million to me. It captures 4 generations of Conrads whose lives were affected by that pond. From my grandfather who helped me to build it, to my son who caught his first fish there. In the summer of 2006, I went back to Pennsylvania again. Dad had been diagnosed with cancer. I was taking him to chemotherapy treatments in Philadelphia. One night, I stopped by the old farm where I grew up. My parents had sold it several years ago. When I told the new owners I was the one who built the stone pond, they said, "We're planning to put trout in there." The stone raceways were still standing. I never realized as a teenager building my pond that it would actually build me. Thanks, Dad, for not getting the bulldozer. It taught me the ripple effect. And then the final comment, all of you will dig a pond someday. That may come in the form of a college education, a new job, or your own business. Just keep digging. The day will come when you scoop your last shovelful and your pond will be finished. And then, of course, his observation, that's unstoppable. Let's pause for a moment and make a few observations in your journals. One that I think is hypercritical to understanding the unstoppable philosophy. And of course, some students are going to roll their eyes at this one because they don't understand what we're about to say. But let's write it down anyway. And some of us will maybe come to understand it later in our life. What you build builds you. I would write that down. I've had students that put that on a piece of paper and stick it on a dorm wall. Stick it in their in the office where they work in their first job. Put it in a locker in high school. What you build builds you. Whatever it is you're building, it has the effect of making you who you are, building you. Notice the second observation. Why do we so often quit? It's a fair question. And we all have examples in our lives of things we said we were going to do and then we quit. Why do we so often quit? I think one of the biggest reasons, and I think Mr. Conrad agrees with me here, is that before we start, we didn't really count the cost. We didn't sit down and say, I'm going to do this even if all of these things make me want to quit. Counting the cost is something we have to learn how to do as we get older. Because with each failure, we learn what it takes to be a success, right? If success was a lollipop, everybody would be licking it, right? That is to say, it's hard to be successful. Counting the cost is a huge step in success. Finally, I think it's important, and the Unstoppable philosophy validates this, that you learn to thank those in your life who have made you work. Notice his father, he writes a letter to his dad, thanks for nothing. I think before you graduate, I always make this suggestion to my seniors, find the people in your life who challenged you to work. We always think of work as in the job, right, that we had. But there's a lot of work besides that, right? There's all the activities you were involved with from the time you were young. There was, of course, all of your educational career. The stuff that you had people in your life that said, work and don't quit. And they made you work and not quit. Those people deserve a thank you before maybe you graduate, right? That is to say, in Mr. Conrad's language, thanks for nothing. Well, there you go. Another important word picture from Mr. Conrad. Thank you.